looks like we're right at 6:30, and I want to thank everyone for coming to our Discovery Den free webinar, Give Them What They Want. Our presenter tonight is Bryan Kandel, and he has been teaching languages for over 19 years and currently teaches high school Spanish in Canton, Ohio. He presents professional development workshops on comprehensible input techniques, the importance of strong classroom culture, successful world language AP courses, reading strategies, and many other topics. I've worked with Bryan many times at the CI Summit, at the VOCE's booth, at conferences like ACTFL, at presentations at ACTFL, and in many, many webinars. He's a presenter and a teacher who builds community really quickly with both attendees and students. So Bryan has seen the power of reading as a tool to improve proficiency and constantly aims to increase reading engagement with his students. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to you, Bryan.
Okay, thank you, JJ. That is awesome. It's great to be here tonight. I am Bryan, and I'm glad to be with you all here this evening. I don't know about some of you if you're teaching, but maybe you're about this point in the year too, but we actually have our first round of parent-teacher conferences this week. So I don't have them tonight, but last night I was at school till 8 o'clock, and tomorrow night I will be at school till 8 o'clock. And so it's been a very busy week, on top of the normal busyness of running kids to football practices and marching band practices and swim and pitching lessons and everything we have going on. But I am glad and so happy to take some time away this evening and share a little bit about this book, Give Them What They Want, and what it means for establishing strong classes, and really with this idea of increasing enrollment in world language classes. This is my website. I am happy to respond to emails and help and support as much as I can. I will share these slides, or at least you can look here and find me if you have questions afterwards and want to send me something. I'll try to get back to you as quickly as I can. This book, which was published, I think a couple years ago now, came from years of me teaching. And as JJ said, I teach AP Spanish, I teach Spanish 3, Spanish 4, and AP. And at our school, none of that is required. In fact, there are no language requirements for our school, but especially you can get an honors diploma if you take Spanish 3. So that motivates some students to go into Spanish 3. But from then on, there's no requirement. And so what I found out without even really thinking about it for years is that I have been focused on enrollment, because if I don't get students to enroll for those classes, I don't have Spanish 3, Spanish 4, AP classes, I don't have a job, and I don't have those classes that I really, really love teaching, which are those upper level classes. And so I have been constantly working on enrollment for years. And so I started thinking about what I do and how I do that. And one of the things that I did is I deliberately stopped trying to persuade or convince students to continue. I will talk to students, especially going into AP, and I will say, I think you would do well, or I think you might struggle, or I think this is what you should do. And we'll talk about what maybe next steps they should take. But I stopped trying to persuade and trying to convince and trying to tell students about all these benefits that they may have in the future. And after I did that, our enrollment actually increased. And the question is, how is that possible? If you stop trying to persuade and convince students to continue, how is it possible that enrollment increased? And that was the inspiration for this book. The trends that we see in our schools is an increase in dual enrollment, college credit plus, post-secondary education. We see this pursuit of credit. And it's not a bad thing, because students are often getting college credits, or they're getting lots of high school credits before they were before. And that's good. Credit is good. They're getting all these advantages and these things that they need. The result of that is a decline in enrollment in world language classes, especially anything beyond what is required. And that's something we are battling that in our school. We are fighting we have some struggles with enrollment as well. And I know every school does. And another thing we're seeing is a decrease in the priority status of world language classes. And this is one thing that I think, sadly, is not going to change. When it comes to priority, we are just never going to be a priority. That doesn't mean that our administrators and our school boards and our schools don't value us or don't want to support us. They do. I know the school I work at, they love what we do in languages. They support us and they value us, but we're just never going to be the same priority as core subjects like math and English and science, social studies. So, what we tend to do as language teachers, our response is we try to persuade or convince students to continue studying languages the same way those core subjects do. We highlight the future potential benefits. We talk about college credit you can earn and how you can get a better job, and your resume or your transcript will look better if you take language classes. And we try to play that credit game. And again, we are not the same priority as some of those core subjects. And really, we just can't keep up if we're trying to do the same thing, if we're still trying to persuade students to get credit. The book is based on this idea. What if instead of that, and I'm not sure how we have some writing here on our screen, what if instead of that, we establish undeniable momentum within our program by teaching dynamic classes that students want to be a part of? So that's what the title comes from, Give Them What They Want. It comes from this idea of giving students what they want. And that doesn't just mean easy, fun classes, but finding out what they really want when it comes to language and trying to offer them that. What if our class is a refreshing break from the norm? What if we're not trying to copy what other subjects do? What if we're not trying to keep up and compete and do the same things? What if we're providing a different, refreshing opportunity for students? What if students enjoy the experience so much that they cannot imagine their schedule next year without your world language class, or without your colleagues' world language class, without the program at your school? What if they enjoy it because they feel themselves growing and they love the experience and they just want to be there again next year? Every year, my students tell me they're fighting to keep Spanish in their schedule. We're going through some of those same struggles. Career tech, I have a lot of students that are in like our med tech programs and culinary programs and even teacher education programs. Awesome programs, but they're starting to eat up schedules and make it difficult. And I have students who are fighting. They're eating lunch in my room. They're doing whatever they can to be in those classes. I have students in AP Spanish with low ACT scores who may not even go to college. And the reason I bring this up, when I tell people this, sometimes they don't understand. They can't wrap their mind around, why would a student take AP Spanish if they're not going to college? And I think that illustrates sometimes the way our perception is skewed, because students are in that class because they enjoy the experience, they feel themselves getting better at Spanish, and they want to be there and they want to be better at Spanish. And that just shows kind of the mindset or the culture of our classes. Students are there because they want to get better at Spanish. I have a lot of lower ACT scores than you would imagine in an AP class, because the students that just want to be there and get better at Spanish. Students elect to take upper level Spanish classes rather than early dismissals or late arrivals. This is another challenge we face. Maybe you do too. Students are allowed to go home if their classes are finished by a certain time, or they're allowed to come to school late. And now it seems like it's later every year, like they can come at noon or whatever if they don't have anything before that. And so often my classes are scheduled at those times, and students have to prefer being at school rather than sleeping in or going home early. And so again, what really comes back to, we have to create experiences that students want to be a part of. So in the book, I divided it into 5 different sections of the type of class that students want to be a part of. And the first key is classroom culture. And this is something that, as JJ said, I've presented on for years and years. It's something that I believe to be so essential to any success in any class. Any of the strategies, techniques, activities, assessments, any of those things that we look at for a class, in order for them to work, we have to first establish a strong classroom culture. And I think that's not new information to anybody. I think we all know that it's important. For me, it's just a matter of being deliberate about establishing that culture. It's interesting right now, today is October 1st. I've had some students for about a month. My Spanish 3 students are new to me. So I have 3 sections of Spanish 3, and they're all new to me. And so I've been working deliberately on doing a lot of these things here to try to establish a strong culture. And I'm seeing the results even a month in. The first one is this: students step into a new world when they enter. Our language classes look different. They sound different. It's just different. It's not the same as other classes. And we need to be deliberate about creating those environments where when they step into our classroom, they just know for 40 minutes, 45 minutes, an hour that it's going to be a new, exciting world. They are not intimidated or afraid to make mistakes. This is an interesting one for me, again, because we've been in school for about a month. And when I started in late August with students who are new to me, they were a little intimidated because they weren't used to maybe hearing Spanish all the time, or at least they weren't used to hearing my voice speaking in Spanish, and they were a little quiet. Some of them looked at me with big wide eyes and were a little shocked. They were a little intimidated. So this takes time to prove to students that they can reduce their intimidation, that they don't need to be afraid, that nobody is going to mock them or make fun of them or criticize them, that they are in a safe place. So, and in the book, all these are described in more detail about how we do this, but it is important to establish an environment where students are not intimidated. Now, intimidation is natural. We all feel it a little bit. We probably can't eliminate it altogether, but we can reduce it, and we can reduce this fear of making mistakes and start to increase the healthy classroom culture. Again, a month into school, and I'm starting to see it. Those classes that just stared at me in silence are now warming up and opening up and sharing. And maybe when I ask them something about what you're going to do over the weekend, the first couple times they said as little as possible, and now they're starting to share, and now they're starting to use the language, and now they're starting to volunteer for things. And that intimidation, and that's just a month in. Once we get to 2, 3, 4 months in, a couple years in, 3 years in, this really drops, and then students just start to fly with what they can do once they're less intimidated. Students are accepted, valued, supported, and empowered. Again, this takes time. Prove to your students that what they say, what they do, their activities, their beliefs, their opinions, they all matter. They're all important. And not only are they important to me, not only do I care about them, but they're important to our class because that's what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about what you did over the weekend, or we're going to talk about your opinion about the school dance, or we're going to talk about things that matter to you. Your life, if you're a student in the classroom, your life, your beliefs, your interests are important. And it's not one of those things where we pretend to be interested. It's one of those things where we are sincerely interested in our students. And I know for all of us, it's one of the best parts of our jobs is making those connections with students. Students expect to hear the target language at least 90% of the time. This is part of our culture. There's actually a couple sections in the book that are about this. For me, this is probably rule number one, probably goal number one is I'm going to use Spanish. I'm going to use Spanish 95, 100% of the time. And we're going to commit to it. It's part of our culture. If I start speaking English, it sounds weird and students throw a fit. Honestly, they don't like it because they just are not used to hearing me speak in English because I speak in Spanish all the time. Now, it's as we'll get into in a minute, it can be very simple. It can be using hands and pictures and drawings and definitions. And one of the reasons that intimidation decreases is because after students are in the class for a little while, they start to realize it's comprehensible Spanish. They're going to hear Spanish the whole time, but they understand it. And if they don't understand it, I'm glad to help them understand it. So it is target language all the time, but it's comprehensible target language. Students are engaged for the entire class time. This is part of our culture. They know we start as soon as that first bell rings. They know we go all the way until the last bell rings. Again, the beginning of this year, for some of my new students, would start to kind of be getting things ready to go with a couple minutes left in class, and that doesn't happen anymore. It's just become part of the culture that we're going to start from the beginning and end at the end, and we're going to use Spanish for 40 minutes. I think we're up to maybe 43 minutes in our classes now. It's not much time, but every minute we're going to use Spanish. Students are connected to global communities where the target language is spoken. This is part of our culture, classroom culture. We're going to talk about the countries where the language is spoken. We're going to explore those countries. We're going to connect, not just language, but we're going to connect to people and cultures and communities as well. Students understand that everything has a purpose. If you've seen my presentations before, you may have a copy of this document. It's a reflection that I use with students. We do it a lot in Spanish 3 when I have students for the first time. I've used it in level 1, level 2. I've used it in upper levels too. It's just a self-reflection where students evaluate themselves and how often they engage with all the different things we do in class, singing or listening to songs, listening to jokes, trivia questions, reading, doing activities. When Profe talks, I listen. When other students talk, I listen to them. Do you do that always, usually, not often, or never? And what I tell them is if there's anything that you're not doing always or usually, start to do that always or usually. This is how you grow your skills, and this is what you'll be assessed on is your skills, not the task that you complete, but your skills in the language. And your abilities in Spanish get better when you engage with everything we do, because everything has a purpose. One thing I also did this year for the first time with this is I sent home a video to students. And this is the only homework that we've done so far. And it was a video about how to listen in class, and how listening is not just keeping your mouth closed and your eyes open, but listening is actually actively listening and engaging, and how people who do that, their skills grow so much. And people who tend to just zone out and not pay attention, they don't grow at the same rate. And the funny thing about this video that I did this year is that I didn't want to, it's in English. I wanted to send it home in English for students, but I didn't want to speak English for it. And I think I have it here. So I created this dumb video with an AI voice. So I wrote it up in English and had this guy AI voice read it. And this is why I sent it home to the students. It's really silly. It's really dumb. I don't know if you can hear the audio.
Prof. At the end of AP, she scored a 5 on her AP exam. Yeah, in fact, he's got a marvelous butterfly.
Silly.
When how strong your skills are, even if there is no immediate scorching,
There we go.
will cost you.
So it was dumb. They all kind of laughed and rolled their eyes at it. But what I told them was it's very important. And if, by the way, if you're interested in that video, I can send it to you and you can make your own or use mine. But the idea or the point was that everything we do has a purpose. And if you want to be successful, you need to listen and pay attention to everything. Because as you saw at the end of that video, what sometimes happens is because students are used to other classes where everything is based on tasks, homework, quizzes, projects, and you get points for those things. Completing those tasks is how you get a good grade. They start to think, okay, we are listening to a song, or we're playing a game, or he's telling a joke. There's no points attached to this, so I don't need to engage with it. Well, as you know, in a language class, that's just not true. You have to engage with everything. That's how your skills grow. And so again, getting them to buy into this cultural truth that everything has a purpose. When I share these slides, this link is live. If you want to use or adapt that document and have your students complete it, I found it to be very, very, very valuable. We usually do it at the end of the first 9 weeks, maybe come back to it later on in the year. The second key in the book is classroom community. Very similar to classroom culture. And in the same way that I think classroom culture is essential, classroom community is also super important. If we can't establish a community, then some of the communication things that we're going to look at in a minute, they just don't work. We have to establish a community. Now, what's the difference between a culture and a community? A community shares, responds, and supports. Think about the town where you live. Think about the way people support each other, how they respond to needs, how they share with each other. The same thing happens in a classroom. A community validates its members. Back to that idea that whatever my students do in their free time, their activities that they participate in, the beliefs that they have, they matter, and they matter to the community. A strong classroom culture, the first part, reminds us that our interests, beliefs, and opinions matter, and we belong in the class. A strong sense of classroom community reminds us that the interests, beliefs, opinions, and needs of our classmates matter as well. Some of this starts to happen naturally. Some groups are really good at it and do it right away. Some groups struggle with it a little bit, maybe because of an individual or a couple of people that just take more time to understand how important community is. We need to be deliberate about establishing it. We need to be deliberate about creating activities where we work together, creating opportunities to support each other, doing a lot of sharing, using the language to share what's going on in our lives and validating that, not just us as a teacher, but community member or classroom members. I was reminded of this yesterday. So, and I'll talk about this in a second, but we do trivia questions in our classes, in my classes, every Tuesday. Every class gets a trivia question. They answer it. On Wednesday, we look at the results. One team wins a point. We keep track of the points all year. At the end of the year, one of the classes wins a pizza party. And so yesterday we were doing this question about a restaurant that opened in El Salvador, and I had like a menu on the screen from the restaurant, and these classes were trying to figure out what the restaurant was based on the menu. And some of these classes that, again, had been just kind of quiet at the beginning of the year, that didn't say anything, didn't talk to each other, didn't really look comfortable or feel comfortable. Yesterday, we're working together, all of them together at the screen, trying to figure out the answer to this trivia question. And it just reminded me, again, about a month into the school year, it just reminded me the importance of community, how when they start to work together, get to know each other, support each other, they start to be more comfortable, less intimidated, and more open to learning language. And so it just reminded me of the value and the importance of community. We teach languages. Languages are used to communicate, to share, express, and support. So we need to do those things with those languages within our classroom communities. The third key in the book is communication, which in a language class should be pretty obvious. That's one of the things that is an emphasis. It's important. It's a focus. We want to communicate. The title of the book is Give Them What They Want. Students want to be part of a healthy culture. They want to be part of a community. They want to feel like they're valued. When it comes to language, they want to be able to communicate. One of the reasons that students tell me year after year after year why they stayed in Spanish classes is not just because it was fun. It was not just because they enjoyed the experience. It was because they felt they were growing in their ability to communicate in Spanish. They said to me, all of a sudden, I feel like I understand it and I feel like I can use it. Not perfectly. I make mistakes all the time, but I feel like I can use Spanish. This is something that students really want. And if you've heard recently on the radio, the commercials, I think it's like Babbel, maybe Rosetta Stone. Some of those products have been around for a while. And if you listen to the radio, you may hear them now. And they talk about, what I've heard them say is like, this is not like your high school Spanish class where you just did worksheets and drills and conjugations. This is real communication. And that's how they advertise and publicize these materials. And I get upset and angry because I yell at the radio, no, that's what we do in Spanish classes now. But in the past, maybe not. And maybe that's what some people think about when they think about high school language class, is that it's a lot of study. It's a lot of drills, it's a lot of conjugations, and it's not a lot of communication. And what these radio commercials prove to us is people want to communicate. They need and want to communicate. For the last year and a half or so, I've been helping out, doing some part-time work with a professional baseball team. And there are coaches and players and staff members that want to be able to use Spanish and English. They want to be able to learn other languages because they need to communicate. There is a real desire among people to communicate in these languages. The students who are in our classes have an incredible opportunity to really communicate if we offer them those opportunities. And their ability to communicate grows, in my opinion, as a result of input. There is a section of the book dedicated to comprehensible input and the way I use comprehensible input in my classes. If you are not a CI teacher, I think there's still a lot of value in the book and in the section of the book. But for me, I am a CI teacher. I use input. And in the book, and again, all of these are described in more detail, but I explain or describe 12 pillars of comprehensible input. The first one is a reduction in quantity. And when you think about comprehensible input, if it's something that you do or something you're considering, it is not about activities. CI or ADI is about mindset. It's about changing our goals. It's about changing our approach to how we teach languages. And one of the first things we have to do, and one of the most difficult things sometimes, is we have to reduce the amount of language that we teach. And that feels so wrong. It feels like, how do we teach less and get better? But we have to. We have to reduce the quantity of what we teach because we just don't have enough time to provide input for everything. So, if we're going to reduce the quantity, what do we teach? Well, we have to focus on high frequency language. We have to cut back to the most important words, grammar structures, vocabulary, language chunks. We have to focus on those things that we can use in communication. And you would be surprised at how much you can do with how few words. We have to have an unwavering commitment to the target language use. I talked about this as part of culture. It's also super important for communication and comprehensible input. Students grow as a result of hearing and reading the language. The most consistent source of hearing the language comes from us as teachers. And we need to be committed to using our target language. It can be simplified. It can be really reduced in the amount of words that we use, but we need to focus on using it. Now, one of the things that requires is that we speak in a comprehensible manner. And that's something that takes time and takes work. What happens sometimes is teachers say, I want to dedicate myself, I want to commit to using my target language 90% of the time or 100% of the time, and they just continue to teach class the way they used to. They just switch everything over to the target language, and it goes way over the head of the students. And the students disengage, the teachers get frustrated, and everything breaks down, and they go back to just describing everything in English. We need to make this commitment to the target language use, but we need to be careful about how we do it. We need to put students in situations where they can comprehend the language that we use. Simplify using gestures, using pictures, using definitions on the board. There's an emphasis on listening and reading. Again, that's where the input comes from, listening and reading. We do a lot of reading and listening. There's an emphasis on language use and not just recognition. And this might seem like a contradiction to the fact that we're just listening and reading, but actually they go together very well. We're going to listen and read because we want to get thousands and thousands and thousands of reps of high frequency language so that we can't just recognize it, but we can use it. And we have to be deliberate about making sure students understand the difference. Sometimes students will see something that we're doing in class and they'll say, oh, I know that already. I already know that. We don't need to do anything with this. I know it. And we have to say, okay, there's a difference between recognizing, knowing what something means, and internalizing and using. And that step from recognition to use requires a lot of input. So you need to hear, read, use hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of times, and you'll start to use it well. There is a reduction in student work. There's almost no homework. There is very little classwork. We're using the language a lot. Students don't usually complain too much about the fact that they're not doing a lot of work. There is an emphasis on personalization. This goes back to culture and community. A lot of what we do, a lot of language we use is based on the students and their lives. There's a constant search for compelling materials. We are providing input to our students. We need them to engage. Students are teenagers, and their natural tendency is to disengage. One of the things that helps us keep their attention or keep them engaged is using compelling materials. When we read things, we read interesting things. When we talk or listen to audios, we listen to audios about things that are compelling and interesting. And the thing about compelling materials is it's changing year after year. There may be a story or a reading or a conversation or something that I used 3 years ago that's not interesting anymore. And so that's why this is a constant search. We need to be constantly aware of what is compelling and what is not to our students. A variety of activities with the same purpose. Variety is important. We can't do the same thing all the time. The same purpose that we have is providing input, but we have to provide input in a variety of ways. And I'll show you some of those here in a second. An awareness of processing abilities. So especially when we assess our students, if we're going to focus on providing input, listening, reading, we can't only assess their knowledge. We have to assess the processing abilities. One example I use with my students often is at the beginning of the year when we have simple conversations, about what did you do yesterday? Or what are you going to do this weekend? Or how are you feeling today and why? When we have those simple conversations early on, it takes them a long time to understand the question, probably translate it in their head, and then respond with something very simple. At the end of the year or a couple years, I'm not asking them different questions. I'm asking them the same questions. The language, the complexity of the language hasn't increased. What has increased incredibly is their ability to process. They don't have to think about that question now, and they respond, and they say way more. Or or any other question, or anything that we do, or something that we read. Maybe the information isn't much more, but they can process and the way they can process it has increased. And we need to be aware of that, and we need to assess that because that is important, because that is a step towards producing the language as well. An emphasis on experience. We focus on having memorable, enjoyable, positive, joyful experiences in class. An emphasis on proficiency-based assessments. Assessment is a giant topic. For today, I'll just say that when we assess, we need to assess skills: speaking, reading, listening, and writing. We need to assess skills because that goes back to everything having a purpose. If we're assessing abilities, proficiency, then students start to tie everything together. Everything has a purpose. If I listen to this song, or I listen to this joke, or I read this trivia question, it's going to make me better at Spanish, and it's going to help me get better grades on my assessments. One of the keys that I've found for this is this: what students say is far more important than how they say it. It goes back to culture, it goes back to community, and it goes back to communication. There's an example I put in the book. Like if you ask a student, what'd you do over the weekend? And that student responds, I went to grandma's house to eat spaghetti, but they say it in the language and they just butcher it. They say every word, every verb is wrong, every vocabulary word is wrong. When you're a teacher, you have there are two options for your response, and you have to make this decision right away. The first one is to correct what they say. No, you shouldn't say mi abuela's casa. You should say la casa de mi abuela. You shouldn't say fue. You should say fui. Our first option is to correct what they say. The second option is to say, oh, you went to your grandma's house. Was the spaghetti good? Who cooked the spaghetti? Who was there with you? Did you enjoy spending time with your grandma? What they're saying is more important than how they say it, especially early on. Now, as they go on and they get comfortable and they get confident, we do start to correct things, and there are subtle ways to make those corrections, and they start to just naturally say things better. And it's one of the reasons I love the upper level classes, because more and more comes out and it starts to sound right. But communication and culture and community says what they say is super important. One of the questions I get a lot about CI specifically, and being an AP teacher, is does CI teaching work in an AP language program? And my response is always, my AP language program would not exist without CI. Because, again, back to one of the first things I said, it's an elective. Students have to want to take Spanish 3, Spanish 4, and AP. They would not want to be a part of those classes if they were not using language and really communicating. My school, again, I love our community. We are a very humble community. We're a public school kind of in an urban setting, and we just don't, there are different cultures in other schools where, everybody is taking these AP classes for their plans that they have for the future. It's just not what's going on all the time at our school. Students are taking these classes because they want to be better at Spanish. And if they didn't feel like they were getting better at Spanish, they wouldn't take these AP classes, and it wouldn't exist. So my answer is yes, it does work in an AP language program. And again, if you have specific questions about AP, I'd love to talk more and more about that. I really think what AP is what CI is leading up to it. And I think they fit together very well. Class components, which we'll pick very quickly. Again, these are all described in detail in the book. What's going on in class almost all the time is I'm trying to provide input. I'm trying to provide Spanish to my students so that they are listening to it and reading it. variety is key. I can't do that the same way all the time. So we'd listen to songs. I tell jokes to my classes every day. They roll their eyes. They don't laugh at most of them, but it's input. We have conversations. Now, conversations can be practice or conversations can be input, depending on how much they're hearing versus how much they're saying. We do trivia questions every week, which include reading and listening and culture and so much language. We do that every week. Storytelling. Some people do a lot of storytelling. Some people do silly storytelling. Some people do none. That's fine. I use it more in the level 3, more in the lower levels than I do in the upper levels, but we have fun with that. It's just another way to provide input. Reading, we do a ton of reading. We read something every day. We read something extended every week. My students don't like reading, but I find interesting ways to do it and compelling text for them to read, and we read every day. Movie talk, where you take a movie and pause the images and talk about it. Cultural explorations in the target language, where we talk about other countries and practices and products and perspectives. Games, we play a lot of games. Now, games, again, can be practice or games can be input. Practice games are fine. We don't do that as often. Input games mean they're still hearing me, or they're hearing something, or they're reading something as part of that game, and they're getting input. And then assessment. I think assessment is input. If we're going to do a quiz or test, if we have to do a final exam and our school says, you have more time for this, they're going to read or listen during an assessment, because I believe that's another opportunity. And the funny thing is, they always focus on it more if they think it's a big test. I think they should focus on everything we do, but they really focus on something if it's an assessment. And it's just another opportunity for me to provide them Spanish to hear or read. Again, I'd be glad to talk in more detail about these. They're described in the book. There are some other things we do. There are other ways to provide input. You may have other ways you provide input, but variation and just getting that language to them. And then the last section of the book is candy, which some people say, oh, is that a joke? It kind of is a joke, but it's kind of not. Like, I do give out a lot of candy or stickers or whatever. It's basically just this idea that don't be afraid to have a little fun. Don't be afraid to be a little silly. I teach seniors. I have state champion wrestlers. I have football players. I've worked with adults. Nobody is too cool. Nobody is too important. Nobody is too old to do silly things. And everybody's excited about candy. So I guess the point of that is don't be afraid to just let go a little bit and have fun with your students. I know some people can't do candy. That's fine. Stickers, prizes, whatever is good. I'm not going to show this, but I will want to recommend something for you. I showed this in a previous webinar. There's this movie called The King's Speech. And if you're a language teacher, I would highly recommend it because it fits a lot of what I've been talking about today. It's working with a guy who stuttered. He was the King of England and he had a stutter, and this instructor worked with him. But in order to get him to fix his stutter, he had to go beyond exercises, and he had to go beyond training, and he had to make connections. And I watched it again recently through the eyes of a language teacher, and I just loved it. And I recommend it because it's so much of what we do. If you have these slides, I think you can watch this clip later. But what I took from it is the importance of going deeper, forming real connections, giving students faith in their own voices, reducing that intimidation, giving them the power to communicate in our languages, proving that someone who really cares is listening to them, and how far that goes. When those things happen, they will want to come back. They will sign up for our classes. They will want to be a part of our classes or our colleagues' classes next year. Okay. That was fast, I know, but that fits us in our time. There again is my website. I have books. I have lots of Spanish readers. I have, again, this book that we've been talking about today. I'd be glad to help any specific questions that you have. But JJ, if you're ready now, I can turn it over to you. Oh, one more thing. If you do get these slides, I also put a video on the end here that we did with Voces that introduces this book that we've been talking about. So you can watch that as well if you want.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, you're great. You're great. Does anybody have any questions or any comments? You've had some good comments here in the chat.
Yeah.
People are really chiming in. They love the community.
One from Lacey Spurgeon. She asks, "What curriculum do you use?"
So I over the 20 some years I've been teaching, I've made a lot of things up myself that I use. I also use some of the Voces materials, the Nuestra Historia materials. I did a lot of writing for those. But even the things I didn't write, I like to use those. It's just kind of a mix of a lot of different things that I've created and gathered over the years, which I know is not a super helpful answer, but it's just kind of a mix and match of a lot of things.
There have been some questions about how to buy your book, and I put that in the chat at the beginning, but I'm sticking it in there again right now. So there's a follow-up question. So you are not a textbook teacher?
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
And where do you put? Oh, go ahead.
No, please go ahead.
Just the next question was where do you pull your trivia questions from?
Ooh, that's a great question. Current events, so like CNN in Spanish, news sites, things like that. Just what's going on in the Spanish-speaking world. Sporting events, like how many strikeouts is a Dominican pitcher going to have. History, things, what happened on this date in a certain country, exploring different countries, just kind of looking at what's going on currently in the world.
Victoria would like. Oh, go ahead, Danielle.
Thank you. I just wanted to tell you that I do not use curriculum either, just because our world language department doesn't. Not because I'm just that smart about it, but I mean, we do have kind of sort of guidelines still. We do have standards we need to meet. We do have outcomes that we need to meet. So they produce outcomes for us, but without the actual material. So what I have, how do you navigate that? That's number one. Number two question is, I have read a lot of research that says people fix their speech when people correct them. Basically, speaking is the most important. And when they're corrected, they just say there's a lot of it. And then I heard you say today, it's really reading, which is what we used to do in my country when we learned French as a second language, you know? Because I mean, I speak 5 languages, but and they teach us that when we were little. So, but reality of it is we used to read. Reading was a class, lecture, like it was just a class, you know? And then reading class. And then you mentioned something about reading and about, you said something else other than reading. It wasn't really speaking, it was reading and something else. And you think those are the pillars of a better education as for a second language. So comments on both those, please.
Yeah. I do think that reading and listening are
Listening.
yes, yeah, help us grow our skills. Now, you bring up an interesting point about being corrected and how that makes us speak better. For me, it does, and it did. But I am and was a nerd in language class. I loved it. I was super motivated. I wanted to get better. And so if I said something, I wanted to be perfect. And if somebody corrected me, I never forgot that. And I did it right from then on out forever. What we have to remember sometimes is that most of the students we have in classes do not share our passions for the language, at least at first. They're not like us. They're not Spanish teachers or they're not language teachers. And especially early on, I just think that intimidation and that effective filter is so important. We have to prove to them that they can relax a little bit and be comfortable. Now, as I get to know my students and they trust me, and they believe that they belong and they start to become more confident, then I correct them more and more. I do, but not at first, not until they're comfortable. So
Yes.
I don't know. I just think like emotionally, it's better to be confident first and then be corrected. And just to remember that it's one of those, it was one of those shocks for me when I started teaching. I was really good at language. I loved it. I was passionate about it. And all of a sudden I was faced with 100 kids who didn't care about it.
Mhm.
And it takes a while to learn to think like students. And then
Mhm.
you have to get them to care first, and then you can correct them.
I absolutely now understand the value of perception. I'm sorry, of perspective versus perception, basically, big time, because I always look at things from their side. So I absolutely agree. And then, yet, I do build like quick rapport with folks, I've been told, and then we get to that point faster, and that's great. But the thing is when they are speaking, a lot of times, even if it's wrong, and we just clap for them, like, great, that was great, still that's amazing because that just gives them more courage as well. So
Yeah.
definitely I am for
Yeah.
that. And then there's a lot of experiments that have been done on this too. I've read a couple that are so amazing.
Yeah. It's funny. Sometimes I just get so used to that of just like celebrating everything they say that sometimes a student will say something and like they'll be looking for the right word. And I'm just kind of like celebrating that they're trying to talk and they're like, no, tell me what that word is. I'm like, oh, yeah. So,
Absolutely. Well, you know what's so funny? I'm so sorry. I did a lesson one time about quel temps fait-il, like what time, like how, what's the weather like, outside. And then you know how there's the sun and there's hot, so both of them had the same picture basically. And I'm like, like more. I started like circling my head like no, and their brains were going and throwing words like, oh, until they got it. And then I said, like, that's the productive struggle, as they say too, is so important.
mhm, mhm.
There are some questions about music in the chat, and
Mhm.
I would like to share my screen and show you all what Voces is about to do. We are just about to launch a partnership with roxem.com. I don't know if you can see the URL up there, roxxem.com. And we will have a playlist for every unit or chapter of every title that we have. So we have 15 titles, and we will have a music playlist that relates either to the countries in the chapter or the unit or the theme of the chapter or the unit. And what's really nice is when you go to Roxem, they're rated for you. Rated G, PG, PG, G, G, G. Anything with Bad Bunny, almost everything with Bad Bunny I've looked is rated R. PG-13. So I still recommend you view any video that your students are going to view before your students see it, because just because I say it's PG doesn't mean it's PG for your context. Only you know your context. But these playlists, we're about to launch them. We should have it all finished by the time we go to Actful. And this is a really exciting new partnership that we've got.
That's awesome. And one quick thing, because I know a question came up about curriculum, and sometimes people are looking for that direction in curriculum, and they're also CI. And I can say I'm not an employee of Voces. I've worked with Voces on a lot of things, but the materials that they have are really good and really strong for connecting CI to something that exists and you can use as a resource, especially if you're starting out. Start with some of the Voces titles. That's awesome. The music thing is awesome. JJ and those at Voces are really good about providing resources and materials that support CI teachers. And so if you're looking for a place to start, I would highly recommend it.
Yeah. Let's see where else. So this other question that we have, someone has money to spend. Boy, that's yay for you. That doesn't happen a lot. But they were asking if we had any recommendations. And actually, I do. We have an engagement bundle from Teachers Discovery that was created to go along with Bryan's book. Oops, that's what I want. Present. And it looks like this on the screen. And Corinne, I think, is going to pop the link in to the chat. You will get Bryan's book. You'll get question posters. There are pick talk posters, dry erase boards, spinners, magnetic spinners that you put on your board, chupa chups, idioms. The staple of my classroom was the calendar, was the dry erase calendar, where you didn't just write in the date, but you also wrote in the weather and discussed it in calendar talk every day until you were tired of the calendar, and then you built in, what are you doing tonight? What did you do last night? What are you doing tomorrow night? Stickers. So there is just a lot in this engagement bundle that is all about Bryan's book. So it was all curated by teachers. Most of us are teachers, former teachers that work at Voces, and we've all read Bryan's book, and we all think it's wonderful and super helpful. Oops, I didn't mean to do that. I meant to do that. The next one. And then the next thing I wanted to show you is we have a Dia de Muertos webinar coming up on October 9th. It's a panel discussion, and we'll have Erica Poplinski-Burge is our host that night, and she has 3 native speakers of Spanish who are going to join her and share what this means to her or to them and their families, and ways that, if you are not from the culture, ways that you can teach it appropriately and how you can address it, and not in a cultural appropriation way. And one thing I learned is they told us it's not Dia de los Muertos, it's Dia de Muertos. The los came from the English translation. We need that definite article, the, in front of the dead. And it's just Dia de Muertos. So if you're interested, scan the QR code, join the free webinar, and sign up, and it'll be a great, just a great time. What other questions do we have? It looks like there's a lot still.
Real quick, I'm going to paste the slides, a link to the slides.
Yes, please do.
Okay.
Yes, that'd be awesome.
I'll send them to you too, JJ, but
Okay.
I'm going to put them here,
Okay.
that hopefully that will be a version you can grab and open, and
Yeah.
let me know if
So
it doesn't
we are
open.
recording this webinar, so we'll send the recording out to you as well. So in the same email, we'll add the link to the slides.
Cool.
Anything, Corinne, am I missing anything?
If anybody has any other questions that we may have missed, you can just unmute yourself. I think we might have gotten them all.
Did we talk about Lacey's question? I currently only teach Spanish 1 and 2 in a community where other languages are practically non-existent. Do you still recommend using the target language 90% of the time in Spanish 1?
So I do. What I hear from people sometimes is, okay, so you teach Spanish 3 and 4 and 5. That's cool. That's when you can start really using the target language. I've done beginners. I've worked with beginners privately. I've done level 1 and 2. And those levels, maybe it's going to be 85, 90% of the time. And upper levels, it's going to be 95 to 100% target language. So it's going to reduce a little bit. But just, I believe you can simplify it, work on super 7 verbs like has and wants and goes and likes, and like gestures, things you can do with gestures until you build enough language to do more. But I think so. I think I would focus on target language in beginner levels.
Yeah.
I guess going back to my question that I put in the post, I'm Elizabeth Hagen. When it comes to recruiting at the middle school, do you have to do much of that, or do you have options there? Because as I said in the chat, I teach German, but we only offer French and Spanish at the middle school.
Yeah. Do you have the potential to start offering German at the middle school?
No, that's been shut down.
Okay. Yeah, Spanish is different. I mean, we get a lot of people in Spanish because it's Spanish. Yeah, so that in that situation where they're starting in middle school and German is not, are you still though able to go to the middle school or communicate with the middle school to try to recruit freshman students?
So presently I run an exchange program so I can get into the middle school every other year for 1 quarter with my exchange students, but otherwise we are not allowed to go to the middle school at all. So I'm just trying to figure out ways to, and my department chair is like, we got to figure out a way to get you in there, but
Yeah.
she's not coming up with anything. I'm just trying to come up with, that's why I'm attending this webinar because
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
really, like,
What we have at our school is we have Japanese, and it's similar.
well, we have Chinese and ASL as well.
Oh, yeah, you have a lot of languages. Japanese is not in the middle school. Our Spanish is. And so what our Japanese teacher does is goes to the middle school and does like Japanese club things after school and tries to do some recruiting. But they do allow our Japanese teachers access. So if you're not getting access to the middle school, that makes it tough. It's almost been pretty much all you can do is recruit high school students to take multiple languages or try to prove the value of German to them. Once you get them there, I'm sure you can keep them there. But that's something that we're facing too at our school is like we can keep them in the classes, but they got to get there first, and that's an
Absolutely.
extra challenge.
May I recommend something? I think they need to team up with the counselors because I believe counselors go to the middle schools to kind of recruit those students to kind of for whatever afterwards, like for them to do the encore classes. That's what I meant. Like,
Yeah.
yeah.
Lacey suggested the same thing, that her guidance counselors go to the middle school to build their schedules and push languages, even if they don't think they might be interested in going to college.
Oh, trust and believe they don't push the language.
Oh, no.
Yeah, just because we're an IB school, so they have to take a language, but not everybody. If it's up to them, they're not gonna push something like that's gonna be a little bit difficult because those students, a lot of them want to change after 2 weeks or 3 weeks, so they just do whatever's easier.
Yeah. There's one more question that I think that we can take, and then we'll probably have to close out. But Michelle would like to know, what is your strategy to keep students from starting to put things away 2 minutes before the bell rings?
Tell them not to. Tell them stop doing that. Pay attention. I feel like at the end of every class we're doing like basically I think I mentioned our classes are about 42 minutes long, which is short. And so I'm always at the end of class, I just feel like I'm doing a lot of things. And so it's just like I start to do things at the end of class that are really communicative and really talking to them and really trying to do things to where it just becomes habit that we're not done until that bell rings. And then kind of telling them, and when they start to do that early on, be like, no, we're not done. Don't do that yet. Don't do that yet. We're not done. We're not done. And then just doing that over and being consistent. The other thing is if you have to be consistent about actually your lessons going that full length, and then just kind of building that over time.
I have an idea. My students, they negotiated the last 5 minutes to talk to each other because in middle school, kids do not have a chance to talk to each other. So I wanted my class to be fun. So with our contract, what do you want from me? What do I want from you? At the beginning of the year, they negotiated 5 minutes to talk to each other. And I thought about it and I gave it to them. And then actually I do have a timekeeper that tells me 5 minutes, then I wrap it up real quick. And then that gives them a chance for them not to leave me. Then it's on my terms that they left. So that just lets you be more in control of the class as well.
Okay, well, thank you everyone for coming tonight. We really appreciate the lively discussion and everyone's attendance here. This has been a very well attended webinar. And I hope everyone has a great evening, has a chance to get Bryan's book, and have a great rest of your semester.
Good night, everybody.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Bryan, for everything. That was awesome.
Pleasure.
Thank you.